Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here with us.
Great fake. Shaw. Deep ball. Owen Daniels. Touchdown Texans. Shaw. Up top. He's got Andre Johnson. Here for Foster. Arian Foster is in. Touchdown Texans. Walt Shaw. Out of the pocket. Throws on the move. Touchdown. Fitzpatrick looking to run again. This time he's hit. And the ball pops loose. Turnover Buffalo. Whitney merciless.
And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up For What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. And we're doing it the fourth and perhaps final fan roundtable this week, as we're trying to make some sense of it as we go through this off-season. We've got a number of topics to talk about this week, getting out some of that depth chart, trying to work out where these building blocks are going to come from in this 2021 season. But we've joined this week by three guys right across the globe again. We got a good, perhaps, representation of this team and what it means to some people. So we've got Matt from Ireland. How you doing, mate? And do you want to give us your Texans moment that made you come back and get entangled in all this all the fun?
Yeah, well, you said fun there. I'm not sure that's entirely what, again, I have experienced with the Texans so far. I got sucked into the Texans just through default almost. I followed NBA first of all, really, and I don't know if any of you remember Lynn's sanity that sort of kicked off in the Knicks and all the things that Jeremy Lin did for them. And whenever he was traded to Houston, a few of the friends and I decided that we'd follow an NFL team, and by default, I just choose the Texans, and that year was the year that Gary Kubiak led the team to a great 2-14 record. And I think after I survived the 2-14, I think that was me stuck. So I haven't seen a good Texans team really, except for maybe sort of two or three seasons ago there, whenever we got the playoffs and then the blowout at KC. But yeah, so that was really how I got involved with the Texans, unfortunately.
And coming to us from Sweden tonight, Bjorn.
Well, yeah, hi. I don't really have that one moment that really got me into the Texans, but I started following the NFL during the 2013 season when the Seahawks beat the Broncos, and then there was this buzz around Clowney in the draft, and the Texans had the number one pick. So that kind of got me into that. Well, there's a team in Houston that's called the Texans. And then when the Falcons were on Hard Knocks, you remember the moment where they are in Houston training during training camp, and JJ walks over the bridge at the training center and just appears like this sort of god. And I think that's kind of my moment where I just realized, well, hey, there's at least something special about this team. And then he obviously followed that with his amazing season with all his contributions on defense and offense. And after that, I was hooked.
All right, yeah, I think that year's funny because it kind of, I think you probably, I don't think you can underestimate it. I think from a sort of probably more global point of view of how many people it brings into a team, and how many people it can kind of captivate and get them kind of inside the coaches, the organization. Most people hate it, but it definitely serves a purpose in terms of people recruitment to league and fan bases and whatnot. And a little bit closer to home, also Matt, we're going to call him HH so we don't get confused. But mate, what's your story, and how close are you sitting right now to NRG? It looks pretty sunny outside for compared to the rest of us here.
Thanks for having me. Well, I'm a Texas-raised guy myself. When I was getting into football, it's hard not to when you're in Texas. It's everywhere. It was always, Cowboys or Texans. And my grandpa actually was an IBM software engineer, and he helped set up mission control at NASA. So it felt sort of natural for me to fall for the Southern team, It was right around the late 2000s. So I was right at the peak of the Kubiak, Rick Smith, Matt Schaub trilogy, so to speak. And then it was 2013 was probably the biggest moment. me and my roommate at the time would always do season opening games, and the first one was in 2011. So we figured we were good luck, so we kept on coming back. But it was 2013, the infamous 2013 opening season, where it was, I can remember it vividly. He was telling me this article he read about how much Matt Schaub had worked and how much better he was going to be. And it was almost poetic. Right as he finished was the first pass, which ended up being a pick six right back. So that was a hard season, but that was also, in retrospect, DeAndre Hopkins' rookie year. And so there was a lot of positive takeaways, sort of changing of the guard. So I figured, even though we have some bumps in the road, there's always brighter futures. Little did I know what would be down the road, though.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, our first ever game was 2012. Yeah, Buffalo at home. Fitzpatrick was playing for Buffalo at the time, and Mario Williams had just signed that big deal after he left Houston. I remember we missed the first touchdown as well. Driving back from the NASCAR on the Saturday, and we missed the first touchdown. I think that was Owen Daniels, and it was a bootleg play action. Adrian Foster running the ball, and it was. I remember that. And you think of all the good, you think of all the bad times, but I remember that day. The place was absolutely rocking, and the atmosphere was great. And it's never been ever quite close to that. I think the team's kind of worn on people a lot from every subsequent visit. But yeah, it's all cyclical. That's what I keep telling myself, and hopefully at some point the tide will start to turn. I don't know if it'll be this season, but we'll chop it up. But I suppose we talked about last week about it being one move at a time, and it's going to take a while for people to slowly get things into place right across the building to try and take one step at a time. So, from Bjorn, what would you say is your favourite move of the off season so far?
I mean, it's not so much a favorite moment in the sense that it's so good. It's more that I think the way that I hope that the defense can be revamped. I think the whole thing about the defense is interesting, with Lovey coming in, implementing a new system, with BMAC being traded and replaced. We get Lawson and Kirksey, not Kirksey back, but we signed him as a replacement. And hopefully with the new coaching staff, we can kind of get out of the tracks that have been for the couple past years, where it frankly has just been going worse and worse. So I think, yeah, that's my. I'm interested to see what Collins can bring on the D line. I think he could be not a star, but certainly very solid and somebody to anchor around. So yeah, that's my most interesting and favorite move of the offseason.
Do you know, I had to think there for a second when you said Collins, and it literally took me about 3 or 4 seconds to remember who you meant, because we've signed so many players this year. I think Malik Collins is a funny one, isn't he? Because he's kind of like I mean, his tape at Dallas. I remember playing Dallas in 2018, and actually thinking, yeah, he looks like a bit of a player. But I think just his form, and we've seen that a lot of times with John Gruden. He doesn't waste time. And if you're not meeting his expectation of what he brought you in for, you don't last long. So, yeah, 1 year in Vegas, and he's looking to rebound. But yeah, I mean, he's got production, I think. And I think there's a common theme with all these guys we've brought in this year. They've either been injured or lacking form, or perhaps unproven with some potential. So there's definitely not many sure things. But Matt, what do you think? What's your favourite move of the offseason?
Even the name Collins was the exact same as you. Scroll down the sort of notes. It was like, what Collins is he talking about on the defensive side of the ball? But I think one of the moves that has excited me the most, or that I've been pleased with the most looking back at it, even though I may not have been happy, certainly wasn't happy at the time with the way that it was done and the way that it was reported. Super excited for Nick Caserio over the next couple of months and hopefully years under his reign. I think we cried out whenever Rick Smith was here for someone who was bold, someone who had a strategy, and someone to move forward quickly. I think then whenever we got Bill O'Brien as our GM, and sure, of course, there's a sort of a guy in between there who didn't really see that much. Whenever Bob came in and became our GM, I think we were a wee bit uncertain if the bold moves were ever going to pay off. But look, I am like Nick Caserio hasn't really put a foot wrong in my eyes. There was the draft, which I think he'd done well enough in to sort of gain a little bit of trust. There was that one move that he did. I think it was the 6th round. He took he traded a pick to the Bills for the 107th, and then he traded that 107th away again so that he could get down to the 170th. I think that's the only move that I haven't been sort of okay with. It just didn't make any sense to me. Signing every linebacker in the NFL, I'm totally on board with that.
Yeah, I think it's Caserio. I was quite critical of him, and it wasn't until actually I spoke to Texans Cap. If nobody follows Troy, I suggest you do. He's got a great insight into the numbers, and he's got one hell of a spreadsheet. Yeah. He keeps up with it. But he said to me actually, because I said to him, "What's the most you can carry over from year to year?" Because my point with Caserio is he spent too much money and too many bets, hoping that some of them will pay off. But I think what Troy said was actually, you've got to remember that there's a 3-year minimum they have to spend, and if Watson's off the books in a year's time, this is probably the best year to do it. So I'm like, well, Caserio's a lot smarter than I am, so I thought I'll yield to, that's the hope, that it wasn't just, he wasn't on commission, because it felt like that at times when we keep signing players, and we kept signing players. But, I think, when you take lots of low-risk bets, if 3 or 4 of them pay off, it might be worth it. We'll come back to that in a second. But Matt, too, what's your favourite move of the offseason?
I mean, alluding to what you said earlier, like there's a rhyme and a reason in terms of like a proven track record to all of Caserio's moves. But the one that honestly left my jaw on the floor was Pep Hamilton coming in the door. From my understanding, he had other offers on the table. I know he was in the running for the Miami gig, which would have been pretty nice. So I'm not sure what exactly he's chasing here. Maybe it's potentially like a promotion in the wings. But I'm sure as heck happy he's here. There's nobody with a more proven track record in terms of like developing a young QB than him. So that's definitely a big feather in the cap for Caserio.
Yeah, I mean, I just wonder if he's got a QB to develop. Do you think he does?
No, not at the moment, personally. I mean, we can go all day about Davis Mills or whatnot, but eventually the proof will be in the pudding. But I think getting his roots and his culture in year one will be good whenever his eventual pupil does walk in those doors.
Seen it in a number of places right now, and a number of outlets, different metrics, different studies have said that, this is the worst roster in the league. Is that something we agree with?
I mean, the only other guys that are in contention with us would be probably like the Lions or the Eagles, but you can easily name all their star players. And we were talking, I mean, you were talking a couple podcasts ago just about like who do we put on the program? I think that in of itself pretty much gives you your answer.
Yeah, I think if you take our roster on paper, I mean, we still, and you put aside all the news, you put aside everything that is going on in the background. I think the media has been tarred with that, but we still have a top 3. It's certainly a top 3, like if not top 2 QB on the roster. That has to bump us up at least a couple of spaces. He may not come back. He may not play this year, but for a simple unbiased media perspective, we've got a top 5, top 3 QB on the roster. We've got a pretty solid offense. I think we've changed our offensive line coach as well. We've addressed the needs I think that we had in the offseason, bar not really too confident looking at it at our wideout core. Cooks had a cracking season last year. We got Malik Collins in as well. I think it's going to be a good stud, a good big body receiver. We did lose Fuller, but I think we're still okay on that side of the ball. Defense, no doubt, has improved player by player. I think we deserve to move up maybe 10 spots just because we don't have Philip Gaines on the roster anymore. So I don't think our roster's as bad as what people put out or what people think. We have a lot of guys who can prove it. Our running back core has definitely gotten better as well. With Philip Lindsay coming in. We got Burkhead as well there, I think, real randomly. Maybe what was that, 3 or 4 weeks ago? We're not going to have to see sort of Duke Johnson trying to catch or David Johnson trying to catch. We can flip those boys in. And I think our O-line, we're going to come to later on, has gotten slightly better as well. So I think all around we could. an optimist at heart, so do take this all with a pinch of salt and let that tell your view. But from a simple paper perspective, I don't think with a top 5, top 3 QB on the, even though he may never play again, we cannot be the worst roster in the league.
Bjorn, what do you think of that? I suppose most people are working on the assumption that Deshaun will certainly not contribute in any great shape this season. Him aside, if you take the remaining 52, assuming you have to keep him as a roster spot until things get concluded, if he's not on the exempt list, where do you place this roster in terms of league-wide talent? Because I think when like Matt said there before, who did you put on the program? Who are your guys? I was thinking, who are your guys who would quite easily walk into another locker room and get game time? And I don't know if there's too many of them. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'm completely agreeing with Matt that as long as we have him, or if you work under the assumption that Deshaun is playing and he's being valued as the top 2 or 3 QB that he is, then this is definitely not the worst roster, because just having that level of QB play has to elevate you to at least top 25, I think. But if you don't count Deshaun, I am completely fine with saying that this is the worst roster in the league. But also, I'm a pessimist at heart, so you have to take that into account too. But what I think that the offense is interesting, and I think it's solid. I think as long as Tyrod can get in and play at a decent level, I think the offense is going to be all right. I think that we have enough pieces on both the line positions and the skill position players, and a ton of running backs that somebody has to succeed. I'm more worried about the defense. If we can generate the pressure that we need in order to give our secondary a chance, because our secondary is probably, in my opinion, our worst part of the roster. I have no faith at all in basically any of the guys we have there. We have no real superstars. We have no stars at all. And I don't want to really put my faith in Justin Reed to suddenly break out, because I've hoped for him to do that over the past couple of years, but he hasn't done it. So I'm fine with us being the worst roster in the league, but I also see that we have the potential to be maybe as high as 20 if Deshaun plays and it all works out.
And has everybody strapped himself in and said their goodbyes to Deshaun, or does anybody got an inkling or a hope that he might play in some form again, even if it's just as a temporary measure before a move's made?
Personally, I think beyond that, like, the McNairs have made their decision.
I think he's done. I think he won't play one snap for the Texans again. I think that relationship is broken.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that as well. I think the question probably I'd ask Matt Reed there is do you what's the difference between Green Bay, who has a quarterback who wants out and they've said no way? Seattle had a quarterback who said he wanted out or threatened he wanted out and they said no way. And then Houston got a quarterback who wants out and they say, yeah, okay.
I completely resonate with that. Totally on board. There's 2 other situations. I think especially Rodgers and Green Bay is something that is a storyline that will probably come. Will be followed even through the season. I think with Watson, I just you put your tinfoil hats on, get yourself ready for so much conspiracy theories. I don't think anybody really knows why Watson wants out. There was rumors I saw on Twitter anyway from Sarge and a few others that he had a meeting with Cully on Friday. Reports and rumors again that there's going to be maybe a settlement in court with what's going on there. And again, stick your tinfoil hat on and get down on your knees and pray that maybe Watson will realize that whatever bad blood there was with the organization, like they at times they did what they had to do. I think the benefit of the doubt needs to be thrown at the GM hire. I think they've maybe tried to help him a wee bit with the allegations, but ultimately they can't do much. And I think Watson's hurt himself as much as anyone else could have hurt him through the allegations that have come out. That wasn't the Texans' fault. They did nothing there. I'm not sure if I were a team like Miami who are trying to build around Tua, if I were a team like the Eagles who, have a great fan base? Would I want to be bringing in that sort of character into my locker room, someone who has these allegations behind him? Or if I was even Watson, would I want to move at this time when these things aren't settled? There was even reports he was going to come to training camp if it had been on after the OTAs. So I don't know. I think Watson's a fighter. I think he's a guy who wants to play, whether that be in the first game for the Texans. I think if he's not traded, I can't see him getting traded before the start of the season. I think he'll try to get his fitness back, and he'll try to play. Whether then we revisit this next offseason and his value's up again because he's a great player, and Nick sort of cashes in on him. I don't know. It's such murky waters, and there's he said, she said, both in the Texans organization and the Twitter journalists that we would all follow. You just don't know what could happen.
And was that, sorry, I missed that at the weekend. Was that last Friday then? That the report meeting? The second meeting of the two?
Yeah. So, well, no, again, yes, because the first was so productive. I think there was reports in the first meeting with Cully that he just sort of walked in and said, "I'm not traded." That was obviously before all the allegations came out. But yeah, there was reports, rumours. Again, that's what I will say. I'll use the word rumours because I think that's what Sarge reported on. If you follow Sarge Sports on Twitter, I think he said there was rumours of a meeting on Friday. That's all I have heard. I try to keep us up to date as anyone on the Texans news, but that's all I've heard. No reports of what happened, what was said, what went on. But again, if there's a meeting with the head coach of the Texans, unless it's walking in saying, "Look, I still want to be traded no matter what happens to these allegations or how much you support me or whatever," I think anything other than that would probably be a bonus.
Yeah, interesting to see. He was with his agent as he got all these pros together for a weekend. They're very vocal on social media. Make it that what you will. But we'll see if there's a change of position, because I think, I've said it many times this offseason, I think nobody could ever disagree that, this team will never be better off without him, and you use, your chances of replacing him, even coming a player close to that is so tough. But who will know if that'll come together. Watson aside, because it feels like I've beat that one to death this offseason, is there any players on this roster that you think, guys, are long-term pieces that you think you could see being around right through the rebuild? Is there anyone on this roster you think's either, got a leap to make, or somebody who you just think's perhaps we've not quite seen yet that you've got a good feeling about?
Yeah, I think that mostly on defense, we got guys that really can make leaps. I'm thinking like D-line. I like what Jonathan Martin could bring. The same with Omenihu. Lonnie Johnson as well has shown potential. People believe in him. And like I said before, I have had my hopes up for Justin Reed to break out over the past 2 years, but he hasn't done it. But I think that the potential is there for those guys. And maybe with a new coaching staff now, we could see that development. And then obviously we got the guys with the draft capital on the O-line with Sharping and Howard that I think obviously have that potential to develop. So yeah, those are the main guys I'd focus on. And then I think we got obviously the guys that are already up there and could be pillars for the future. I'm thinking Cunningham, I'm thinking Tunstall. We really need those guys to step up and be the leaders that they can be and that they should be. Because without them, I don't really see a pathway for the other guys to develop. So we need the high level of play for at least some guys, to then the other guys having people to follow in their footsteps and develop too.
I was watching the 2018 Eagles game back. I just watched a couple of 2018 games the other day. And partly my thing about Justin Reed was that, it's a contract year for him. He is, or my defense of him, he played well in 2018 as the third safety. But if you watch that game, he doesn't play well. You watch Zach Cunningham get beat up on an easy wheel route for a big gain. He's his biggest flaw in his game, despite giving him over 13.5 million APY in that new deal, he can't really cover the pass. So, they're probably your two biggest hopes on defense. And they're film, sketchy at best. Do you think Justin Reid's, got the potential to be the player everybody thought he would be? And do you think Zach Cunningham can bounce back from last season's, incredible inconsistencies, particularly in the run game?
Well, I'm very hopeful, just like everyone else is, about Justin Reid finally taking the leap, quote unquote. I mean, Tyrann Mathieu, when he was here, spoke nothing but highly about him. And that's something you usually don't hear. I mean, look at how Ross Blacklock got treated by J.J. Watt, But, I mean, to your point, yeah, he just really has not shown it. When he comes downhill, he usually is not always making the right decision, which is weird because he's usually a very intelligent player. I like in terms of like his leadership, what he brings to the defense, but I'm not holding out hope. And to your point with Cunningham, yeah, these seem like great athletes, great guys, but fundamentally flawed for what we're asking them to do. So that leaves me a little bit, pessimistic about that.
Yeah, Matt Reid, what do you think in terms of building blocks? Is there anybody on this roster?
Yeah, so I was just going to nip in there because I think that question that you posed, who are the cornerstones of our franchise sort of going forward? There really are not too many, especially if we do get rid of Deshaun. I think, as we've said before, Watson elevates talent, and the wide receiver core. You've got Cooks, I think, is a great receiver, but maybe a few head injuries away from maybe retirement. Aside from that, I think the main guys who've been signed as well, they've all been signed on 1-year deals. Guys who we're excited about have come in. And my fear is that anyone who plays this year who's on a 1-year deal realizes that he could get a lot more money elsewhere, or he could get success elsewhere. And so that I always go back to Philip Lindsay. I think he's going to be a great player. I think he's a great running back. I was so surprised that we were able to get him, and that Denver didn't try a wee bit harder to get him. But after this season, Philip Lindsay could get however many yards, and we could be really excited for next season. But he's on a 1-year deal, and he can clear off to wherever he wants after this. And so there's really no. As sad and as realistic as it is to say, there's no cornerstones for the franchise to build on, and so how does a rebuild happen if you don't have anything to build on at all? I mean, even from the standpoint of a coaching staff, I can't see Cully being here in 3 or 4 years' time.
No, I think you're right. I think he said he's been brought in to build on this situation or take the situation it is. Bjorn, what do you think? You've got Cooks there mentioned. He's got his contract reworked. He's only got 2 years left. You got Zach Cunningham, will have 4 years left after this, so he might be around. But you've got a number of guys, of that 2018 draft class: Justin Reid, Jordan Akins, Kiki QT coming up for contract year. Can you see any of those guys at least being extended into second-year deals? And being part of the future?
Well, I think that's one of the few things that are actually good about this season, that we have a lot of players that has the ability to make that leap and also have the incentive to make that leap with the fact that they are in contract years. So like you said, a guy like Akins, the oldest guy in the NFL, but for the amount of guys that we have that have that potential, I think it's great that they also are in contract years, because that might light a bit more of a flame under them to deliver and to work as hard as they possibly can to earn that money.
Yeah, and I think like Philip Lindsay's a good example of that, but he was on a restricted tender or some variety of that mechanic under the CBA, and Denver decided to release him. So I don't know where he is health wise. Every player will always tell you in interviews they're feeling their best, or they've recovered better from injury or what have you. But the reality will be right across. We'll find out when training camp rolls around, I suppose, when you get the reports of who is actually healthy and who looks like they're going to be able to come and contribute. A guy that falls into that category is Justin Britt. Do you see him, we'll talk about a bit about the O-line, but do you see him being the starting centre?
Yeah, I think we've lost the other Matt. Yeah, I think again I was reading an article there in the Athletic by their Houston Texans correspondent. I think it's Aaron Rees,
Yeah,
Reiss. No idea how to pronounce that. But I think in OTAs, Britt was starting at center there. So I think the O line looks in a decent shape with Britt, and I think is it Toner as well. He's sort of the backup center. Who there's just been such a turnover in players that it's hard to keep track of who's playing where and who's even in our team, to be fair. And then left guard, it seems to be sharping. But yeah, I think I'm happy enough with Britt there. A lot of these players seem to be coming off the back of seasons with injuries. That worries me as well. But it looks like Britt's maybe as you say, saying that he's fit, saying that he's healthy. So yeah, I'm happy going into the season with a new O-line and a new O-line coach as well, which I'm heavily excited about.
Yeah, I don't think you can probably underestimate. I mean, when you saw the investment in the talent and then the level of performance of last year was just, it just was inexcusable, the O-line. I think, you even heard that like late into 2018 about the players, complaining about what they were working on in practice and you saw that. I mean, 2018, they just gradually couldn't run the ball was the season and just physically couldn't do it. And that, re-emerged itself last year, obviously being the ground attack or the poorest ground attack in the league. And I think what will be fundamental about this team is can they run the ball this year, because they're going to have to balance out the lack of passing attack. But Bjorn, in terms of those three interior guys, it looks like it could be two, if not all three, replacements from last year. Who do you see and this is one of the true positions that you do have starters or true starters, but Bjorn, who do you think your three guys in there will be when the week one rolls around?
Well, I think it's surely going to be Britt at center. I think Sharping at left guard. Right guard, I'm not too sure about. Have we seen who's been playing there during the OTAs? Has it been Cannon, or is he thought about as being the swing tackle?
Well, yeah, I think that's the big question, isn't it? I think, but I mean, the move that I disliked the most this offseason was Marcus Cannon. You think when all the investment you've put in, you've got 3 years worth of draft picks and first round draft picks at that into the tackle position, and you go and trade for another one and move out, a couple of spots in the draft and take you out basically. And Caserio admitted by the time they got to that stage of the draft, they didn't have anybody left on their board. So it's a difficult one. I think, I think it's perhaps it's Cannon there, but which makes even less sense when you think of the job that Rod Johnson's done in the last couple of years. I think he's been, he's probably one of the most improved, if not the most improved player at the ball club, I think, and to go and invest in that position again, fair enough. It's a premium position, but it's a strange one. I think, for me, I mean, I'm not entirely even sure if Justin Britt will play centre.
Yeah, so I think on that O-line front, I think there was talk, or I saw it somewhere, of saying that Hard will potentially move into that right guard position, which again, as you said, he's been playing right tackle, and then you go away and you trade for Cannon, and that's where I think Cannon will be. I think Nick Caserio has brought him there. He knows him from New England. I think that's where he's going to slot in, and they're just going to move Hard inside, which is where that sort of right side of our O-line. I'm just not too sure whether I like the movement that's happening on that right side. Hard inside, much prefer him at right tackle rather than a guard.
Yeah, because I mean, I talked about that earlier in the offseason. I thought of there's very, very few players that we've got young guys under the rookie wage scale who could be here in years' time. One of the few guys, maybe Ross Blacklock, Laurie Johnson, Max Sharpen. You could count them on one hand, and a lot of them are all big Fs. And you think to endanger Howard's development and move him into guard when he's already played left guard. He started off his rookie year. He's already played the most number of games at right tackle. But I suppose, it might be a case that they perhaps just don't trust him health wise. Matt Robinson, what do you think in terms of Howard moving inside?
This has sort of been like the unexpected, most common offseason storyline that I did not, expect to see at all. You take a very promising right tackle who really was going against some pretty good pass rushers last season and holding his own on a pretty pass heavy team, towards the end of the season after BOB. And so the idea of just like, completely squandering all that and throwing him inside and we even talked about this after the trade. You mentioned your gripes with it. For a guy that, completely sat out last year, is coming off an injury and had very limited production when he was at tackle, considering he was blocking Tom Brady. So I think, there's a lot of concerns about that. In every national media person, when they review the offseason, they also have Cannon at guard. So I wonder how much of this is just, some little buzzwords to get us talking, and how much of there's actual validity to that. Originally, I thought that Lane Taylor was going to end up grabbing the right guard spot because, that he originally had that in Green Bay before injuries derailed him. So sort of throws a wrench in it. I think it could be any one of those four guys holding down the interior.
Yeah, I mean, if again, and the question is if healthy, but I think he played one game last year. I think he missed the majority, if not played a small handful of games the year prior. So he's a guy who's not really played football in 2 years. So, but Lane Taylor, I think, if you consider his links with the coach at the O-line position, then I think he's probably a guy who I think has got a very good chance of making this roster. And in terms of the backup positions, guys, have you got any thoughts? I mean, and after the draft, I watched tape both of Green and Ryan McCollum, and Ryan McCollum at center. I think for a guy who, I think when you watch that Texas A&M line in college last year, it was pretty special. It was one of the guys that were all, I think 3 out of the 5 are all seniors. And they got Kellen Mond drafted perhaps higher than he might have done if he wasn't on a good team. And you can say that about any quarterback, but I think definitely those two guys have got a chance. Just as anybody. I know they signed Gary on Christian later on. They've got the guy Fjoltort on the roster as well. Bit of a Scandinavian name, and then for you, Bjorn, is there any guy you've got a feeling that might make the backup on this roster beyond the providing some depth? Because you saw that in previous years when Greg Mance came in and filled in admirably and Nick Martin's rookie season, and you think if you go back and look at that, they were offered a late round pick by Philadelphia at the trade deadline, end up cutting Nick Martin after giving him a deal, and they sort of invested in the wrong guy. So I think competition they've preached. Who do you think is going to provide the competition in these spots?
It's a tight one again. You don't know who is starting. We're not really sure who's moving about. You mentioned Roderick Johnson as well, who could back up in a couple of positions there if he's not starting. Lane Taylor as well, you said, could make a good shot at starting. And so I think you preach. I think the unfortunate thing about Caserio is that we had a GM and a coach last year who preached cliches and just came off with just sort of the same cliche one after another. But Nick preaches the same sort of cliches of competition and performing from day one. And look at the OTAs, there weren't too many there, even who I don't think Hard and Cannon even practicing the OTAs. So I think they're going to be maybe even down a peg from a coaching standpoint. The sort of three in the middle of Sharping, McCrory and Britt started in OTAs, and so I think there's just going to be a lot of competition. I think we're going to see a lot of brutal decisions as well. Some guys cut that, especially from the O-line and the D-line, that maybe we thought could have made a couple of moves into there, or a couple of games at least. But the backup on the O-line, I think I'm just excited to see an O-line who can block for the pass, or block for the run. Sorry, I think I'm so glad that Devlin's not here anymore. So I think I'm happy enough with any 5 players who have been coached by anyone bar Devlin to line up.
You've got to think Charlie Heck. I know it was a strange 4th round selection coming out of North Carolina, but you think him or Rod Johnson are not necessarily going to be on the roster unless they're going to take 5 tackles, which they might. But typically you take 4, and then you got some guys who can maybe kick inside as well and outside, and then you they're your extra, they're your extra man. Probably the 8th or 9th guy you'll take on the roster. But again, it just shows you a 4th round pick from a year ago. It's another misuse of resources. When you had other spots to fill, and it's going to be an interesting cut down at that spot.
So I was just saying there that I think Heck came in there sort of for the last 2 games, was it, and just got, from memory, obliterated. Guys just ran past him. So again, as you say, a 4th round pick. So part of me thinks they maybe wanted to tempt his dad over to help coach the team at that stage, but that's the only reason I can think of wasting a 4th round pick on Heck. He looked way off the pace in the games that he played.
Yeah, I think that was the knock. I think coming out of college, pass protection was sketchy and run blocking wasn't too bad, and he was part of that improved line that blocked. When they switched to zone. I think for me, guys, I don't know if you got any reflections, but in terms of how they're going to run the ball and what sort of scheme they're going to run, I don't think anybody knows. And when you think of all the different guys they've brought in, you think maybe that's why they brought in Cannon, because he suits the style they want to run the ball at. And perhaps Titus Howard, I think his pass protection is definitely his strong suit over his run blocking. So, do you have any thoughts in terms of how they're going to run the ball and how they're going to improve from last year?
Yeah, I think that's probably like the biggest knock you could probably put on Howard would be his run blocking. So if that's based on like their signings in the offseason, it does seem like they're going to be a very run heavy team. So if that's truly something they're trying to emphasize, then maybe I can buy into that. But to your point, it just seems like a gross mismanagement of resources. Like both the Cannon, the Heck, all of it could just be used on just grabbing a developmental guard, which Campen has proven he can develop. But to your point, yeah, it does seem like they have a very set in stone way. I think they're going to sort of do a marriage of what Baltimore is doing with a little bit of what they did in New England, which is the starting running back is the healthiest running back on hand. But yeah, there's still a lot up in the air in terms of what they're trying to do here.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I think if you're going to run power, that's fine. But I'm not sure if that's what Tunsil's great at, and he's the guy who's got all the investment behind him, and a big reason why we're in this position. And from everyone I've seen, he's more of a zone blocker, and because he's a big athletic guy, he can get out in space. But he certainly didn't look like he fancied it a lot of the time in the run game last year. So yeah, I think that's the concern. I think Will Camden give this unit a lift. I think just by being a better teacher, being a better, more disciplined and a better schooled, starting 5. I think the answer is yes, but just exactly how they'll do that, and hopefully they'll find something and they'll stick to it, and have a go-to, set of proficiencies. Because I think what the biggest issue with Mike Devlin was, and I think he hamstrung Tim Kelly last year, was he changed week to week. It was that game plan offense stuff that Bill O'Brien preached all the time. They changed the running style week to week, and it just meant you had 5 guys that just didn't have, a set number of favorite plays that they want to go and knock out a linebacker and clear a hole for the running back. They just didn't have a proficient go-to, and if that's one thing we get from the season, then I think it'll be it will make us more competitive. But it's a big if, I think, at this stage, and particularly when you don't know who the starting 5 are going to be. Guys, Max Sharpen, you think he's got enough left in the tank? Good rookie year, sophomore slump. What do you reckon?
As you say, you just don't know where the front 5 are going. You've no idea what these guys are thinking, and for the amount that we've given up for other players. But I think as the other Matt said, you're looking to develop guys, you're looking to bring them on, and I think one of my favourite Devlin quotes was whenever he said that Tunsil could be taking the training, which was just exceptional. So whenever you've got that sort of a coach, you can understand why Sharping would have had a down year after his sort of, I wouldn't say burst onto the scene, but he certainly played well in his first season. So I think he can regain that sort of form, flit in and out of the starting line, and see how he goes. Again, how many snaps he's going to get, I'm not too sure. I think I would rather see a set 5 compared to what we had last year, where the guys were switching it quite frequently. You had even sort of mid-game, I think a couple of players switched from right guard to right tackle. It's just, it boggles the mind whenever you think back to it. I've sort of, I've compartmentalized that sort of season, as we remind ourselves of how truly bad that O-line was. I just sort of not great, but I think Sharping deserves a spot. There's no doubt about it. I think he has a lot more to give. I think with the right coach and good partners in the O-line, I think Sharping could be a solid player.
Yeah, and I think that's it, isn't it? It's cohesion, and it's the most important part of the whole team is the cohesion between those five guys. And yeah, when they were subbing out Killamenti, they brought in Brent Caveo towards the end of the season, and I think Sharping was in there, then he was out, and look, Max did not play well last year, and look, I hate when people base their perception of their off-season program on social media workouts. But he doesn't seem like he works that hard if you were based it on that. So I don't know. I think it's like any of these guys. I think you've got to find out, do they love the game? Do they love football? Are they invested to do what they need to do to get better? And and one thing O'Brien did say that was always true, is a gradual improvement. Like, you have to keep improving. And we'll find out if Max wants it or not. But I hope he does, because he's one of the few guys who have picked up high. As part of that Dwayne Brown trade, that you had some irons in the fire for potential roster spots and quality players and quality starters to try and give you some formation of a roster that might have a composition to be competitive. But yeah, I think there's a lot to be decided, particularly those interior three spots. I think it could be anyone. I know Drew Doherty said this offseason that be prepared for a shock at that spot. So we'll wait and see where that comes in. In terms of the tight ends, Bjorn, obviously you got Jordan Akins in a contract year. We've got a trade for basically a blocking tight end from New England. You've got Kahale wearing an enigma. Nobody's quite sure what he might be. And then you've got a surprise Brevin Jordan pick in there as well. What do you make of the tight end position? And do you think that might be a plus for us? Because I think since CJ Fedorov's retired, albeit he wasn't certainly a premier talent, but he was a rising talent until he got an injury. We've not really had anybody who's kind of been a go-to consistent target throughout the season. Can you see any emerge from there, and who's your sort of top 3 or 4 guys you think might make this 53?
Well, I think that, as we talked about earlier, that Akins has the most to prove, and also the most he's the most probable to prove something to us. I mean, I think he has flashed at times. He has the speed, he has the athleticism to do it, and hopefully he can take that step. I wouldn't count on it though, but hopefully he can do that. I think, like you said, Izzo being brought in from New England as a blocker, I think he makes the roster just based on that. And then I think that Brevin Jordan is going to be safe unless he really craps the bed in training camp, because I mean, with the draft capital that they invested, I think he's a very interesting prospect. I am actually not that unhappy with that pick, because I think that when you have the roster build that we have right now, when you have the difficulties coming up that this team's going to have, I think, taking a shot at an athletic tight end like that, who can maybe develop into something very interesting, I think it's fine. And then I think Pharaoh Brown actually showed pretty good last year at times. I'm interested to see if he can continue and be just a stable tight end with solid NFL production. So I think it's going to be those 4 guys.
Matt Reid, what do you think? Pharaoh Brown, he certainly looked like he was developing into the role quite nicely towards the end of the season. I know he made a bit of a crass tweet about his check still clears even when the team was kind of down and out. But I mean, his on-field production looked like there was potential there. He was a big player at Oregon. Is he in your top 4, and who's the other 3 if he is?
Yeah, I think Brown would be there. As you said, made a couple of good plays towards the end of last season. I think it was it the Tennessee game where he just absolutely bulldozed someone on the far side of the field. I think Pharaoh Brown has done well. I knew there was a lot of hype around Kahale Waring, and I just have no idea how he has made it this far in the NFL to get a roster spot last year. So I think it's time to let him go. Maybe let him just sort of sit in the practice squad for season. Call him up needs be. But yeah, bar that, Akins. I was quite excited about the the Jordan pick as well. Some good reports of him, some good film as well. Seems to have nice hands, quite athletic. So he's got the measurements. So yeah, I think those four would be my four as well: Akins, Jordan, Brown, and then Izzo.
Matt Robinson, are you out on the Kahali wearing? I think really for me, I think you think Brown's going to make it. Brevin, Jordan, and Akins. Brevin's probably a replacement for Akins. I think in terms of physical profile, and is do you take who's the fourth spot there? Is it Waring or is Izzo or Quisenberry? Out of those three, you'll keep probably one inline blocker. What do you think?
Yeah, I think Akins and Brown has pretty much earned his spot after last year. So the real question is, does Ryan Izzo steal somebody's job? And in that draft, when we took Waring, that was the big storyline is we took two tight ends or however many we took, and neither of them really knew the position. So I always thought that was an eyebrow raise, and Waring has done nothing to show me that he has actually learned anything in his time in Houston. I would love for him. He's super athletic. I would love for him to be the seam stretcher, but I have not seen it yet, and I don't want to hold out for what I haven't seen. So yeah, more than likely, I think Izzo is probably going to be in just because we're such a run-heavy team. They're more than likely going to put a value on that type of skill set, However, anybody that follows me on Twitter, I'm an avid draft guy, and I was very against the Brevin Jordan pick. In a vacuum, I'm a big fan of his. A lot of people were hyping him up as this next slot move tight end, and personally, I just don't see that. On Mock Draftable, I have the closest comparison was Ed Dixon, and I think that's pretty favorable considering we have Andy Bishop from the Ravens staff. So I would love if that was sort of his trajectory and development. I think you can actually get some very usefulness out of him. He's a great straight line guy, got a great feel, a lot of positives to him. I just was a little lower than everyone else on that. And then it's just a question of if Anthony Leclerc will even make himself known, which I hadn't heard of him before this season. I'm not sure if I will after.
Yeah, the tight end position is funny, Nick, because we've drafted a lot of guys. And I think I keep going, considering Ryan Griffin's still in the league, I bet he wishes he didn't get a bit fucked up and punch a window in Nashville and get released within a week, because he probably could have beat out Galley wearing it if he hadn't have done that. I know he was a bit of a cap casualty, so he might not have been here anyway, but he was certainly probably the last sort of true productive one we have. Jordan Akins continues to flash every year. He's got all the measurables, but we're now going to year 4. He's not got a new deal. I think the team at this stage, would perhaps be, remiss to offer him a new deal. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to be decided at that spot. But yeah, I can see us playing 2 and 3 tight ends to help run the ball and take advantage of short intermediate yards with Tyrod and getting the ball out quick. I think that's definitely something that they've preached through OTAs, and I think they were happy with the fact they felt that Tyrod could get the ball out quick, and you've got to think the tight ends will play a big role in that, because if you look at the wide receiver group, there's not a huge amount of big go up and get it guys apart from your rookie you've just drafted. So and Nico. So I think the tight ends will have to play a role, and I think we'll definitely keep 4. Who those 4 guys I think remain to be seen, but I think definitely that last spot is up for grabs on that. Guys, in terms of just touching on the draft there, are you ready to, Matt Reid, are you ready to hit the fast forward button on this season and start talking about the draft after 4 or 5 games when it seems like it might be lost, or do you think there's a lot to be learned and something to be gained from the 21 season?
Yeah, again, as you sort of asked the question, I think there's a lot of storylines, especially for the Texans organization, that still need to be worked out. And still will probably weave through the season, and I'll be quite excited about that. I'll not want to fast forward to the off-season, certainly not, and just sort of bin this season. You think of Watson, you think of our wide receiver core. I think even Nico Collins, I'm excited about him and see what he can develop into. I want to see our coaching staff as well. I think we mentioned at the start, I think Bjorn said, the new sort of the side of the defense, I think it's been relatively improved. We mentioned Gaines and how he's no longer in the roster, and a new O-line coach, and obviously it's a development. There's maybe not, as we mentioned again before, there's maybe not the cornerstone pieces that you would look for in a rebuilding team, but certainly there are things in the coaching staff, in the organization as a whole, that it can be exciting. And if the results are not exciting, which I'm almost 100% sure they will not be, at least there's storylines there that you can follow along with and make it interesting. What's going to happen with Watson? Is Cully going to actually be a decent head coach? We've got a second-year offensive coordinator as well. What's he going to be like? What's Tim Kelly going to do? He threw a wee bit of decent plays whenever the shackles came off from Bill O'Brien. I think Tim Kelly could be a decent wee offensive coordinator. Pep Hamilton, what's going to happen with him? How much of an impact is he going to have? We could be seeing Davis Mills run out sort of week 14, week 15 if things get really bad. And what's going to happen to those. So yeah, it'll be interesting to watch. Being a fan from the UK, you sort of have to follow every niche because you don't get really the feel from it walking around the streets of Northern Ireland. There's nobody else to talk to except for the three Texans podcasts I listen to weekly. So I'll be following this as much as I possibly can.
Yeah, I'm conscious that we don't want to try and start. Most of last season was just looking forward to the head coach, GM hire, and you knew you didn't have any draft picks. But the draft pick, I suppose, does bring an element of excitement. Bjorn, would you hit the fast forward button right now, or do you want to see? Do you want to go through some of the pain of this year to make it worthwhile, and the reward this year, finally, for the first time in what feels like forever, we'll have a high draft pick. You've got to assume.
Yeah, I think Matt said it really well with the coaching staff, that we have a lot of things to look forward to because of the culture change that is coming, and I think that also goes a lot higher in the organization. It's going to be interesting to see if Caserio can really get this roster turned around and get it to what he wants it to be. I think he has already started trying. It's going to be interesting to see whether he succeeds in the players that he has brought in. He's brought in so many that if any of those turn out, hopefully they do. And so I'm trying to think and trying to see during this season if look for those things, how the new culture is becoming and how Caserio's moves works out, and hopefully that leads to more answers than question marks at the end of the season, that we can know a bit more about what the team's going to be for the coming season, know something about how the coaching staff, what the culture is going to be like, and maybe know that when these players are coming back, these players are solid, and we got this high draft pick, we might trade Watson, get a haul from that, and then start over again. So I think it's interesting to see how the turnaround comes around.
First and foremost, I'm looking forward to the David Culley post-game interviews every week. I'm circling that on my calendar. Can't wait for all those answers. It's going to be my entertainment for the week. No, but in all seriousness, just to quickly piggyback off what they were saying, I think the new coaching staff is a reason for optimism, but mainly just because it's away from what we've known. Like, it's not just one perspective, one philosophy. You have guys that have been around, bringing a multitude of perspectives and philosophies into the building. And I think that'll really help improve these players. And also, I just want to see how much of an impact it actually makes, how much of it was on like the player evaluation versus the player development. I think that's a decent storyline to look forward to. And yeah, I'm incredibly happy to finally have, a first round pick that isn't going to get used on like definitively a tackle that everyone knows. I'm looking forward to the Kayvon Thibodeau versus Spencer Rattler debate that's going to ensue all season long. And yeah, I'm looking forward to just finally moving forward. I think it's going to be a couple of years before this team can get going, but I think everyone's just looking for progress,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I struggle with Spencer Rattler, I think, personally, but I mean, I know he was just a kid when he was on QB1 Netflix, and I know he's been kind of involved in some things. You saw him got benched last year, and look, his film is getting better, but I've not got anything to base it on other than sentiment or feeling. But yeah, the prospect of drafting Spencer Rattler, I think he seems quite an immature kid. Bringing him in to a team that's rebuilding, I think you're probably Thibodeau, or the guy I really want to see, Derek Stingley, who he's been touted as better than Jalen Ramsey, and we've never had a cornerback, apart from Jonathan Joseph, really, on this team that's been worth contention, a big, of premier player conversations. So yeah, I think we've got to start building, from the ground up. And I know that the insensitive phrasing that Cal used about brick by brick, after all the kind of stuff that was going on at that point. I think it's got to be bit by bit, and I think hopefully you'll see some of that come through. Matt Reedy, you got any expectations for this season? What do you think the record will be, and where do you see this rebuild? How far do you get in the rebuild this year?
Yeah, I don't particularly like predicting records to the team. I know that anything can happen in sport. I know it all too well from following this team and thinking even last year that we were going to, I think this time last year, if you had asked me for a record, I would have said, we could go to the Super Bowl, really, with Watson at the helm. So I'll not give you a record prediction, but I think positives for this season are those guys who are on the 1-year deals. A lot of guys on prove-it deals, a lot of guys who are going to want to remain in the NFL on our team or on a team, and that'll just drive them to do better. If they're not going to be playing, if they don't play well this season, some of these guys' careers as starters anyway, could be over, and that is a recipe for a form of success. Not sure what that form will take, but certainly I think the days of people walking back or missing their assignments because they're on a big contract, and I think those days are potentially gone with the culture of the team. I think there's a lot of guys who will want to show that they are capable football players, if not outstanding football players. Even thinking of the secondary, I don't think we've mentioned in this podcast, but King, I think he could be a great pickup. Someone who wants to prove that maybe he is. I think lots of these players will want to prove that they're better than the Texans, and they could be on a contender next year. So I'm happy to see where that leads us as a franchise.
Yeah, I think I know. For example, Jordan Akins was the most called about guy at the trade deadline, and Desmond King's probably a good, potential contract that somebody might want to take if they're contending. Bjorn, do you think it's going to be more upheaval before we start to see stability, or do you think this is what do you think we'll gain out of the rebuild this year? And if you got any record predictions?
Yeah, I agree with Matt. Again, I think what he's saying about these players having to really prove themselves, I think that's gonna give us like a level that is decent, but I'm not sure that it's gonna lead to many wins. I just think that especially the defense is just too bad. So I think my record prediction would be 4-13, probably 3-14, around there. I just don't see us winning many more games. I mean, our division is toughening up, and the schedule is tough as well. And without Watson, it's just I just have a hard time seeing us winning more than those maybe 4 or 5 games tops.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like Matt said, sport is funny at the time, and it works sometimes in the most counterintuitive ways. And I wouldn't be surprised in some ways if we did win 5 games, just because it would make no sense to do that without Watson, assuming he doesn't play. I'd like it to be many more than 5. And if you've got some bright sparks in there that that can contribute, albeit probably at a higher cost in future years, and I think that they're the big things. And I think the development of players, I think is just I think we'll understand at some point this off season or this season, as 10 weeks or so, but hit the bye week, how much did that last coaching staff hold back good players? I know they made terrible front office decisions and let good players go. We know that was clear, but there was very few players that ever developed. Dylan Cole threatened, got injured, and you would struggle to name many players that were under O'Brien and his last coaching staff that actually got better. Arguably DeAndre Hopkins, but you could argue he would have done that regardless of who his coach was. So I think, let's see if they can actually teach, develop, and for the players that have been recruited for them. But Matt, do you see any more over 4 or 5 wins, and have you got any hopes or any at least some foundations for the rebuild? You might see some green shoots that might come out in this 21 season.
Well, to your previous point, I sure do hope they end up sneaking out a few more wins, like the sneaky veterans end up playing up. And I think that's ultimately like the biggest storyline this season. This reminds me a lot of the Miami Tank for Tua campaign, where everyone and their mother knew that this was going to be a bad football team, but a lot of praise got thrown on Brian Flores for, rallying the locker room, getting everybody up and motivated on Sunday morning. And I think a lot of people have trashed or critiqued the notion of us having the oldest roster. But when you look at it, that's honestly what you need. You need guys that have motivation to get up and play. And I think that's the biggest reason. Also with the salary spending, which may not be true, maybe. But I think that's the biggest thing that might make us a little sneaky competitive. Based on their philosophy, I'm not sure if the offense can keep up with how much the defense will let up. But I very much would like Derek Stingley. And I think if we could get a few like above 4 wins, end up getting like the 4 to 5 range and sneaking off into like a 4 or 5 draft slot, I think that wouldn't be the worst thing that happened to us, but almost every over under I have is like at 3.5. I'm betting on like 3. I think 3 to 5 is a really safe range based on what we have on the roster. But I think that's more than likely what we have coming down the pipeline.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I suppose when you look at the number 1 overall pick, I don't think that's necessarily the be all and end all. I know people are probably, you want to be sometimes you want to be in a position to have the high draft pick. But if you see the 1 or even the 2, sometimes, particularly the quarterback spot, and I think I was listening to something today and they were talking about, there's arguably no quarterbacks that are even good as Justin Fields in this year's draft. So, the overall, arguably at this stage, there's a full and proper college season to be played. But in terms of those guys that might be the top of the draft, you might just want to pick defensive, or offensive cornerstones to start the wheels turning, and hopefully to a position where this team can win some games. But guys, thank you very much for your time tonight. Appreciate it. Some technical difficulties, some confusion on names, and some dodgy internet connections, but hopefully we managed to just make a little bit sense of the off season together. And we're getting a little bit closer right now to training camp, just a couple of weeks away. And hopefully we'll start to see some of the formations and some of the stuff we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks. But thanks again for everybody listening. Thanks again for your time.